But what the heck is going on with this team? And who are all these old people in the lineup that keep starting?
I've given up on trying to understand what the Lakers are up to. It's so convenient to shift the blame onto the head coach. Players who fail for certain teams are still good players. They're just not the right fits for certain teams.
He's not an epic scorer. I would never call him an MVP candidate. He's not even an all-star. But he's just a guy that makes the team better.
And I think Jimmy Butler is still one of the most underrated players in the league. I absolutely despise Grayson Allen.
Grayson Allen had that flagrant 2 foul on
Flagrant 2. Flagrant 2 foul.
The Chicago Bulls, baby. Number 1, I think. Still, let me just see. I gotta check the table. I am not sure.
No, they're number 2, man. Everything seems slow when Chris Paul's on the ball.
No, how old is Chris Paul? Probably 37 is my guess.
Ancient. That's all that's important. And it's time that he leaves. Just get out of here now. Enough.
Hi everyone and welcome back to another episode of All About Sports, the podcast. You're joined today by 2 of your co-hosts, myself, Rishabh, and also Mazhar.
Hey everyone.
So before we get into this week's episode, make sure to check out last week's episode. We did a roundup of, the 2 big test series that happened over December, January. That's the Ashes as well as India's tour of South Africa. Make sure to check out that episode. We also talk about, obviously, the resignation of Virat Kohli as the test captain, which obviously got us pretty passionate. We're all, reasonably big Virat fans. So with that, let's get into this week's episode. Again, if you listen to us, I've said this before, you probably know this, when it's just the 2 of us, it's typically the NBA. We're getting back into the NBA this week. For those of you who follow the NBA, there's a pretty emotional return pretty recently to one of the Splash Brothers, Klay Thompson, coming back from an emotional stint with the injury. He was out for 2 seasons, 2.5 seasons actually, finally came back. He's not completely returned to form. He's still kind of getting in there. They're trying to give him as many touches as they can. He's not completely gotten into a flow, but fitness-wise and cardio-wise, he's looking okay. But his shooting and overall scoring isn't quite at its peak, but that's to be expected after being out for so long. So we figured we'd talk a little bit. We have this whole conversation surrounding Klay Thompson. So kind of how the NBA has changed, because he's been out for so long. He's been out since June of 2019. So a deep dive kind of into how the NBA has changed in those 2.5 years. So how different it's been from June 2019 to what the NBA is now. Maz, I'll start off with kind of what we discussed, before this call even, is what has caused some of the bigger power dynamic shifts. Let's start off in the Eastern Conference. The Eastern Conference looks really different than it does last time. It's looking pretty fun, pretty interesting at the top, Maz. Where would you want to go in the Eastern Conference for teams that have kind of completely switched since 2019?
I think it's pretty evident since 2019, the switch, obviously the biggest one being the Nets. It started off with DeAndre Jordan, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant wanting to join hands. Then obviously DeAndre wasn't a fit, and just no more at the level like he was in his Clippers days or even before that. So once that changed, they went through another change again. Then they brought in Steve Nash as head coach, which was critiqued massively as well, where there were those talks around white privilege and so on and so forth, all those things. So they underwent so much of a change. Have arguably the strongest team in the league now.
Definitely away from home. At home sometimes.
Hashtag Kyrie. But genuinely, like, I don't know. Everyone thought that last season that they would do well, obviously, looking at that team. But we all know it never really plays out like that. Even the even the Heat with Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, and James did not win a three-peat. So it's always difficult. But now it's all settled. When KD leads that team, it's scary. He can literally lead any team from anywhere. And what a player. Just Kyrie needs to sort his shit out. take the shot pretty much like Djokovic, right? It's one of those. So, but yeah, definitely for me, that's been the biggest shift in terms of the power dynamics since Clay left. Because also, what happened was, of course, the Warriors were weakened. Steph was carrying so much of that burden, still doing an immense job considering the team. No one would have ever imagined that team would make the playoffs, right? And Steph just stood up, took the opportunity, led his team all the way. And now with Clay being back, they're serious contenders, I would say. So I think those were the two biggest shifts in general. But it's funny how KD's been a part of it in general. So it just tells you how what an unbelievable player he is as well.
You that's a great point about KD actually, because whenever he moves, almost like LeBron, he causes a power shift with him. When he moved from OKC to Golden State, we saw the kind of shockwaves that moved through the entire NBA community. Not as much when he moved to Brooklyn, because Brooklyn weren't as big as the Golden State super team, but obviously caused a big shift both in the Warriors and the dynamic of the Western Conference, and then obviously a huge change in the Eastern Conference. As a reminder for our viewers, at the time when Klay got injured, Brooklyn Nets were a very different team, right? They just made the playoffs. They had D'Angelo Russell as their point guard, and a team that everyone kind of loved because it was a team built on chemistry. Not necessarily any huge names, but a team that kind of just meshed together well and somehow made the playoffs after a decent number of years. I think it was their first playoff, the first time they reached the playoffs after they had Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce. So it was a nice return for them. And I think what's not changed for Brooklyn Nets has kind of been buy-in. One of the big things that led them to that playoff run was they all bought into Kenny Atkinson at the time, who was the coach at the time. They all kind of bought in. They had great chemistry. That's what's been really interesting about this Brooklyn Nets team, and kind of how you can contrast it to the Laker team that we'll talk about in a little bit. Everyone on the Brooklyn Nets team buys in. I expected there to be so much more friction with the whole Kyrie Irving situation. They've all just said, we understand the situation. That's what he believes. That's fine. We're going to make it work. They've all been so supportive. You have older players like Patty Mills, Blake Griffin coming in, and they've all just been such good culture fits, and they've been willing to do whatever needs to be done on the court. We push you to the bench. We'll play you a limited number of minutes. Doesn't matter. When they come in, they call themselves the, I think, Hard Hat Academy or something. And they just come in, they work hard, and they just do a phenomenal job. And they're all kind of meshing together. The chemistry on that team just seems surprisingly good to me. It's really, really good how well they mesh together. And I'm sure Steve Nash deserves some of that credit. But yeah, they look like a really dangerous team. Let's not forget last year, they probably missed out on an NBA Finals trip because of KD's shoe size. He was on the line, hits a three-pointer at the basically at the buzzer would have given them the win against Milwaukee, but his foot had just overstepped the line. Was game 7, could have gone through. So they're the major threat in the Eastern Conference, and like you said, Maz, completely shifted in the 2 years that we've seen. Another team that I think has shifted reasonably. They've always been a successful team in the league, but they've taken a big jump. A team that I know, Mazhar, you love, the team with the Greek freak, the Milwaukee Bucks. Can you talk about kind of how they've evolved from being a team that's always been successful in the league to maybe, in the regular season rather, to taking a jump up in the last couple of years?
I think, Krishnan, it helps when you have a superstar on your team who's so committed and shown his loyalty. It makes all the difference, because then you want other players who will be willing to come to that team because they know that this guy's still going to be there, right? Sometimes what players might have apprehensions to join a team saying that, oh, he might only be here for a year. Then what about me? Like, where do I go next? This guy will still get a trade, but what about me? So with all those things, I think that makes a big difference to the team, the structure. Of course, Giannis and Middleton were with the Bucks for so long together, that changes everything, because now you have two all-stars, perennial all-stars that we're talking about, who just work together, are always team first in their mindset. I think that that's what brought about the change for the Bucks. Obviously, Giannis just keeps seeming to get better and better and better, and it's like non-stop for him. But I think also the other thing is the Bucks choosing to stay loyal to Bud was a big move, because everyone questioned his choices in the come playoff time in terms of minutes and putting Giannis on the bench and still giving him those many minutes around the 30 odd mark, even in the playoffs. He obviously rectified it. They went on to win the championship. So all of that has happened after Klay has gone out, though. So I think the biggest change is because the Warriors started also not winning, meant that another team had to step up, and I guess the Bucks did that. So I think Giannis's loyalty is the biggest reason that the Bucks have succeeded and seen that dynamic shift. They've brought in the right players at the right times. We saw Brook Lopez, who failed at the Lakers. We can go on to talk about the Lakers after this. But the fact is, players who fail for certain teams are still good players. They're just not the right fits for certain teams. Brook Lopez became a fantastic signing for the Bucks. There wasn't only that. Even right now, they have some great players. I absolutely despise Grayson Allen. I know many people disagree with me.
I was just going to say a smart pickup, Greg Grayson Allen, who struggled. But
yeah, exactly. That's why I went there. But I went to that point. But his flagrant 2 on Caruso also recently was just terrible, man. I don't understand that guy. He's definitely, whatever said and done, he is a loose cannon, and we've seen it too many times now. I just wonder, when will it stop, or will it stop? Because like in football, we see it a lot, right? Granit Xhaka is like a
I
perfect
knew you were going to
example
bring
of
it up.
that.
I mean, it's right. I knew you were going to say that.
But that is literally the example I can draw, like the perfect example and comparison I can draw for what Grayson Allen is. So I think, yeah, but he works in the system. That's what I'm saying. Bud has found the system. Obviously, everything works around Giannis, and Giannis more often than not can carry the team as well, which he does, but produces results. And as we were discussing before this, I think the Nets and the Bucks are, like when fully fit, are the two strongest teams in the league. Yes, AD needs to play for the Lakers, but still, yes, AD and LeBron can be enough, but that team is otherwise so bad, man. So that's another change as well, I'm sure, which we'll talk about.
I was going to say, must save your rant energy for 10 minutes when we get into the Lakers, because there's a lot to talk about them, as there always is somehow. Not too much to add on the Bucks front. I completely agree. I remember actually talking to a Bucks fan last year, and I remember telling them, even if the Bucks win the NBA Finals, y'all should sack Budenholzer. And I still felt to some extent at the start of the playoffs he was doing the same things again. He just didn't he didn't like have the right rotations. And again, I'm regurgitating what a lot of people have said, but didn't have the right rotations, didn't play his like star players at the right times or enough. But I think he evolved a lot as a coach, and he frankly shut up a lot of people, including myself, in winning that championship. And Giannis was just unbelievable in the finals. And like you said, smart pickups along the way. I'm a huge PJ Tucker fan. Did a great job in that fight, throughout the playoff run, most iconically guarding KD in that awesome battle against Brooklyn. Bringing in Drew Holiday has obviously been a major shift for them from moving away from Eric Bledsoe. Good decision by the Milwaukee Bucks. So they've changed a lot, and they're looking, again, like you said, Maz, they're looking pretty solid. Let's talk about the other team that's now very solid, where I'm based. The Chicago Bulls, baby. Number one, I think. Still, let me just see. I got to check the table. I am not sure.
They're number 2, man. It's the Nets who are first.
The Nets. God, they keep switching.
But the thing is, let's be fair.
Yeah.
If the Bulls do win their next game, then they're equal in the record. As we as we sit right now recording this, the Nets are 29-16 and the Bulls are 28-16. So let's just put that out there. So yeah.
Yeah, and this is off the loss yesterday against Milwaukee, the game that Mazhar was talking about, where Grayson Allen had that flagrant two foul on
Fragrant
Caruso.
too. A fragrant
Flagrant.
too.
Sorry.
Yeah, some nice armpits going up there
Oh,
for
that was.
sure.
Let me just say, Alex Caruso, great player off the bench. One of the best armpits in the NBA, I would have to argue. One of the best armpits in the NBA. But getting back to it, Maz, I wanted to talk about the Chicago Bulls because I'm super excited about them. They've played really well. Honestly, I will say I think they're going to struggle in the playoffs. I think they're a little bit over reliant of DeMar DeRozan in the final minutes, and he's playing really, really well, but he's also taking and making some reasonably tough shots. I just don't expect that to stay in the playoffs, and historically, DeMar DeRozan is a great player, not had a great record in the playoffs already. Add to that, way too much reliance on the mid-range, for my opinion. I actually think Zach LaVine will be able to contribute, or will start to contribute a lot more in the playoffs, which could be pretty important. Maz, what do you think about the Bulls? I'm a little bit confused about them. I think they've run really well in the regular season. They'll keep doing well in the regular season. Can they really translate this to the playoffs? Because this is a huge change. We were not a playoff team when Klay Thompson got injured. We had not even made the playoffs in the season that Klay Thompson got injured. Obviously, this team has changed a lot. Where do they look like right now from where they were 2 years ago?
Oh, I've been raving about the Bulls. I was raving about them before the start of the season when we did our preview as well, right? I was very excited for what was to come, given that Caruso joined and Lonzo was also there. It just seemed like their backcourt was very strong off the bench, and that's what we've seen. We've seen good, enjoyable, fast-paced basketball. We've seen some amazing link ups as well. I think Vucevic was a great pickup for the Bulls too. It's just I don't know about the playoffs. It all depends on matchups. I agree. I think they will struggle in the playoffs, but you never know. It's a funny game. No one would have expected the Bucks to win the championship as well. Now, and that's what happened, right? So I don't know. As of now, let's say even if they finish seventh, so if they finish second, then they have the Hornets. I think they'll definitely beat the Hornets. So then in the semifinals, it might be a bit tricky because again, you might have to face either the Bucks or the Nets, and I'm not going to bet on them winning against either of those two teams. So that's why it's tricky. But I don't think they'll do a bad job. I just think they'll come up against teams which are better than them. I don't necessarily. I wouldn't call it failure for them if they don't go beyond the conference semifinals, of course. But I definitely see them winning the first round, no matter who they play from those teams in the bottom or the second half of the playoffs.
And it can't be a failure because when you look at the time when Klay Thompson got injured, that season they finished 13th in the Eastern Conference. So they were absolutely terrible. I mean, we still at that point had Otto Porter. We had Zach LaVine was really the only common link. I'm looking at the rest of this roster from 2018, 2019, from the 2018, 2019 season. I don't think any of these guys are anymore with are no longer with the Bulls. Lauri Markkanen's now moved on. He plays for the Cavs, I believe. Timothé Luau-Cabarrot, I think, plays for Brooklyn now. We don't have anyone. I mean, the only common thread really is Zach LaVine. The team was absolutely horrendous. So this is a huge step up. And that's a good point, Muz, because I think even if they get knocked out of the second round of the playoffs, that's such a huge step up. That's such a huge step up from where they were 2 years ago. It's almost a relief. And it's a nice team. It's a fun team. They bring excitement. They're really fun to watch. So yeah, maybe they won't reach all the way to the finals. I don't expect them to reach all the way to the finals, but they'll be fun. They'll continue being fun. Lonzo Ball as well. One of my favorite underrated players in the league. He's not an epic scorer. I would never call him an MVP candidate. He's not even an all-star, but he's just a guy that makes the team better. He's a beautiful passer, works so hard on the defensive end, locks down like the opposite guard usually pretty well, great passing, good shot blocking even. So really like him. Super fun team in this conference. as I'm going to go to the last team in the Eastern Conference before we shift over to the West, another team that's changed since 2019, basically with one guy moving there, Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat have just always been a decent side. They've always somehow managed to never really drop off, which is really impressive because so many squads after LeBron James leaves typically have a massive drop in their performance. Admittedly, in the 2018-19 season, which was the season that Klay got injured at the end of, they didn't make the playoffs. I believe that was Dwayne Wade's last season, if I'm not mistaken. They finish off 10th. They don't make the playoffs that year. Had a bit of a switch the next year where they reached the finals against the Lakers. Maz, how does Miami team look? They look very good currently. Talk a little bit about how they look currently and talk a little bit about where they've come from and their evolution in the last 2 years with Jimmy Butler on the side.
Miami was helter skelter where at the beginning. I mean, it was only Wade, right? Wade was the only reason why Miami was relevant after LeBron left. And then, well, it was literally just there was nothing going on. They are fortunate enough that Eric Spoelstra didn't leave, and he's still one of the most elite head coaches in our league. So I think credit to him for that change as well. He identified who he wanted and he knew, and what a player to pick up, man. I think Jimmy Butler is still one of the most underrated players in the league. Uh, just simply because of his defense. And I anyway do like players who can hustle and play defense like him. And he can stretch the floor. So it just has all the tools that make him just great to watch, doesn't he? He's so good in interviews. Love the Tyler Hero and Jimmy Butler connect as well that they have. They've got great pieces all over, and I think that's what makes them a good team. And Eric Spoelstra knows how to make any team work, right? So I think that pickup was just perfect. They needed someone they didn't need a superstar, right? After you've had Wade, you've already been there. You need to rebuild, restructure everything. You can't get a LeBron, fine, so be it. You can't get a Kawhi, so be it. Go for the guy who's always been ignored. Smart move. Butler came in, wanted to prove a point because everyone seemed to like not want him after a point. Just made it his team in a lot of ways. And if you watch that Bam interview, if you've watched even Duncan Robinson, all of these guys, just all their interviews, and they've all said one thing, that Jimmy's our guy, Jimmy's the leader. And they've all bought into his mindset, and that's been the difference maker. So when you have someone who's so influential on the court, I think it just changes everything. Where like Butler can literally airball a shot on multiple occasions in the last second of the game, and they'll be like, oh, it's okay, and they'll never get frustrated about it. And to have that extreme belief in your leader speaks volumes about that team. And since they have like this one person to look up to and follow and trust, I think it just keeps that entire team chemistry going in a lot of ways. But that's the thing. When he's not playing, it becomes tough for them. And we've seen them struggle without him because they don't seem to have that next leader. Bam is amazing. Bam can carry a team, but again, when it comes to like crunch time and leadership qualities, I'm not sure if Bam has that. So I think that's where they are lacking. But my God, from the times of when they, like you said, Krishna, they didn't make the playoffs in Wade's last season, and then we saw him going to Cleveland as well, and then again coming back. God knows what was going on there as well. That Swan song was kind of anticlimactic. Also, it happened to be at the same time as a certain Kobe Bryant, so it didn't work out too well for Wade. But yeah, my God, changed so much. Obviously, made the final in the NBA bubble. I thought did well enough in the series, the best they could have done. They could have easily have made it a 7-game series. But then AD's game winner took it away, and then the rest is history. So yeah, now third in the East, still going very strong. Again, it comes down to matchups. I don't think it's going to be tough for them to make it beyond the semis. Maybe some certain revenge, but Giannis, how do you stop Giannis? So
No, absolutely, Maz. I think what is interesting about this team to me is they're only third, and they might shift to fourth, depending on how the Bucks perform in the remainder of the season. But I still think they're a team that is the third favorite to me after the Nets and the Bucks. To me, they're actually going to be even more impressive than the Bulls in the playoffs. Kind of like what they were in the 2020 season. They weren't the top seed in the East, but they managed to knock off the Bucks in that season, and eventually go on to reach the finals. So they're a team that I think gets better in the playoffs. And like you said, Jimmy Butler, I know style of play wise, he's not at all like, for me, he's not at all like Chris Paul, but he has this one similar quality, which is he doesn't need to be scoring all the time. He's happy to just, facilitate. He's happy to just focus on the defensive end. But in the fourth quarter, when he's needed, and if the team is struggling with scoring, he will pitch in. He will start to, take more shots. He will start to get into his scoring. He'll start to get into his bag. I kind of think of Chris Paul the same way. Chris Paul's very happy to keep facilitating, keep helping others. But if he needs to score, he can get into it and start scoring and get into his area. So Jimmy Butler is similar that way. Quick note, they reach the finals in 2020. Next year, get swept by the Bucks. Great performance by the Bucks to kind of show them up the next season. This year, though, again, Miami looking pretty solid again. The solid acquisition of PJ Tucker, which I think, again, is going to be huge when it comes to the playoffs. And Tyler Hero, he's bumped up to becoming a 20-point per game player. That's going to be a really, really nice boost for them now coming off the bench. So I think they're a pretty well-rounded team, third best in the East to me from a playoff perspective, in my opinion. So they're going to be really interesting. Maz, let's move to the Western Conference. I'm just going to hand this off to you, and you can just absolutely free flow, go where you want to with this. The Los Angeles Lakers. What the heck is going on? This is actually, to be fair, they've not changed that much from the 2019 season when Klay got injured, because that was the last season. It was LeBron's first season there. They didn't make the playoffs. They struggled with their young core, who they tried trading for AD, couldn't trade them because the Pelicans didn't accept anything. And then in the summer, the trade just ended up happening with the same guys anyway. So kind of a lost season. So maybe they haven't changed that much, but Muzz, take it away. They won a championship in 2020. But what the heck is going on with this team? And who are all these old people in the lineup that keep starting?
oh god, man, I just do. I've critiqued this man enough, and I can't critique him more. Rob Pelinka, I don't know what he smokes or eats before.
Is he the GM at this point? Is he really the GM? Is he the GM, or is it a LeBron, Rich Paul, Red GM? I'm so confused what this guy does.
I don't know what he does. That's the thing, right? Like, I'm not sure, but like, no excuses now. Fine, whatever said and done. But if you, as a GM, no matter who it is, right? No matter, even if you're LeBron James, you gave away some integral and crucial pieces for AD. Fair enough, you won the championship. After that, was there really a need to give up Caruso? Was there really a need to give up some of these players? They gave up Rondo, brought him back, and gave him off again. They brought back Dwight Howard. What was the point of giving him away in the first place? And you're telling me, they're trying to free up cap space. But you just wasted so much money on unnecessary players. So I don't know what was going on the back end. And in terms of like everything else as well, it's just beyond me. Like, I've given up on trying to understand what the Lakers are up to. We have all been so critical of Russell Westbrook anyway. And Derek Fisher calling him Westbrook was not wrong. With seeing this regularly happen, he just throws up breaks. He's a good player, like, no doubt. He's fun to watch, but he doesn't fit into a system. He has no idea what he's doing on that court. I feel like Frank Vogel also doesn't know what to do with this team anymore. Now there are rumors that they want Vogel out. It's so convenient to shift the blame onto the head coach. Like, yes, I don't think he's probably the right coach now anymore for the Lakers, but also who do the Lakers have? Like, Trevor Ariza is ancient. With no offense, he was a hell of a player, great defender once upon a time, but there's nothing there. Avery Bradley refused to play in the bubble because of health reasons. Fantastic player again, but what's the point? No one has the legs anymore in this team. There's no defense in this team without Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis himself has said he's been shit when he's played, and now he's injured, and that's another issue about of that he's always had are his injuries. At this point, I feel like there were talks about bringing Porzingis in. I would rather have taken Porzingis in at that point in time. Now that when I look at it retrospectively, at least there's something there. He offers something more on the court. You can work around in terms of your financial budgets as well. Then your salary caps, all of that is brought down. Then you can make a team for the future. Just because LeBron is here and he wants to win now, they've done so much, but all the moves were wrong. There's no way you can tell me that LeBron sat there and he's like, "Oh, bring in a Ariza."
True. That's probably not.
There's no way that's happened. There's no way that LeBron sat there and is like, "Oh, get rid of Caruso." There's no way in hell LeBron said, "Get rid of Caruso." So I question a lot of these trades that they made and the moves. Caruso had to be re-signed, for example. They gave up Kuzma as well. Of course, that was in the Westbrook trade, which I'm okay with because Westbrook is still, whatever said and done, he's a bloody superstar. If you have AD, LeBron, and Westbrook, you should be winning regardless, no matter who the other three players are. So I don't know what's going on now. There's apparently a tiff between Westbrook and LeBron as well. I'm just done with them, man. Yeah, you're right. They've not changed from 2019. Just personnel have changed. It's just gotten much older. They gave up Brandon Ingram. They gave up Lonzo. They gave up. Now they've given up Kuzma as well. They broke that young core three that the Lakers had. Before that, they even gave up this guy to the Knicks. What's his name? Randall to the Knicks as well. So they literally broke the entire young core of the Lakers because LeBron wanted to win now. Yes, produce the result, great. They didn't think forward. They didn't plan anything beyond that season. And that's what sucks. They couldn't even keep that core together, which is the problem. And Schroeder as well, man. Schroeder himself, he fucked it up for himself, and then in the process fucked it up for the Lakers too. So
Buzz, I think you pretty much covered everything. I think the strategy was simple. We want to make the best starting five we can by having three superstars in Russell Westbrook, LeBron James, and Anthony Davis. The problem is in a COVID-inflicted season, plus Anthony Davis injuries, plus LeBron James also having injuries. If you have an injury to one of those people, one of the three, and with Russell Westbrook's performances so far, it means the rest of your team is so depleted. And that's what we've seen. These starting lineups are so disappointing outside of the superstars. We were discussing this even before the call. Avery Bradley and Trevor Ariza would not start for 29 of the other teams in this league. And they've started a couple of times at least for the Lakers. They're consistently starting them. I think the last game, Dwight Howard was starting. Their team is so limited in how good they can be by their starting five and Anthony Davis. The rest of their team, the reserves, the bench is so weak. Taylor Horton-Tucker and Sekou Doumbouya are the only two people who were born 2000s or after. So 21/22, they're the only somewhat young talent you could argue in this team. It's looking like a hard team to root for. I still think never rule out LeBron James in the playoffs, but not of
At this
optimism.
point, even the playoffs are good. Will they make it through the play-ins at this point is also a question mark.
No,
So
it's a completely frustrating team, and I'm not even a Lakers fan, but it's a completely frustrating team to watch. Muzz, I want to talk about now for the last section in the Western Conference, and then we can wrap it up. I want to talk about a player actually. I'm not going to talk about a team, but a player, Chris Paul, and his movement because I think his movement has really defined the teams he's played for in the last 3 seasons. 2019, he moved from Houston to OKC in a move that took Russell Westbrook to Houston and him to OKC. The transformation of OKC in that 1 year and going forward has been amazing, especially his influence on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Next year, he moves to the Phoenix Suns, carries them to the NBA Finals, and now in this season, they're currently first. They are first in the Western Conference, looking very, very solid. He has played a huge leadership role. They had an amazing 17-game win streak, if I'm not mistaken, in this season. They've looked absolutely fantastic. Muzz, talk to me about Chris Paul and the influence he's had on the teams since Klay Thompson's injury in 2019. His influence, maybe even right before that for Houston, his influence for OKC, and now his influence on this Phoenix Suns team.
I absolutely hate talking about Chris Paul.
Oh, I forgot about that altogether. So
But
this is perfect. We send it to Muzz.
what a player, man. Since the start, like since he entered the league altogether, let's go way back, right? We'll talk about his time the literally with the New Orleans Hornets to, like you said, then Houston, then OKC, and now with the Suns. He's just what an amazing player, man. Like he's just so good at reading situations. He makes everyone better on the court. And we were discussing this. We kept saying that Aiton's going to look so much better with Aiton's going to be much more successful having a point guard like Chris Paul feeding the ball to him. And it's proven to be the fact. Aiton is pretty much unstoppable. I remember he made the Lakers look like an absolute joke. He was mauling them inside early on in the season. So just phenomenal. It helps Phoenix as well, simply because Devin Booker doesn't need to. Devin Booker was always the one carrying the team. Now he doesn't need to worry about that. There's much more freedom in terms of how he's playing himself. Yeah, that's what he does, man. He gets this. He's got this aura about his game, and then he brings on his persona, just brings about this calm. Everything seems slower when Chris Paul's on the ball, and that's the biggest praise and compliment I can give him, is the fact that he seems to slow down the game, a game which is so fast now, right? It's all about, like, no one cares about the 24 seconds anymore. It's get the ball. If you have an open 3-point shot, you take it. It's just become like that. Jay Crowder, I'm still going to go back to him as well. I think Chris Paul can pick out Jay Crowder at the right time as well. That is a lethal combination again, because Crowder is a catch and shoot guy. Who better to pass the ball to you than Chris Paul? Like, as a shooter, of course, if you're asking me who do I want kicking the ball to me, I think my first choice would be Chris Paul. 100%. He just knows when to pass the ball. He times everything perfectly. He's very rarely taking shots that are ill-advised shots. Very rarely. In crunch situations, sometimes where he feels that okay, he has to take that responsibility and he'll miss. That's fair enough. He has developed and that enough respect, I believe, to miss a few shots here and there. But complete player. I'm just picturing a team where I'm picturing a time when I would want to see Chris Paul feeding the ball to Klay in a playoff scenario. And it sounds scary. It sounds absolutely terrifying to have that, right? Like, my God, imagine Chris Paul in this Lakers team instead of Russell Westbrook. Unstoppable. You don't even Chris Paul will also figure out ways to make all these guys better, and he'll figure out a way to make a team work. I mean, he's a timeless guy. So it doesn't matter pre-Clay or post-Clay's injury. One thing is for sure: if you have Chris Paul in your team will improve, your team will do well, and potentially you're in for a shocker or a surprise, a pleasant surprise if you support that team, or just are a basketball neutral. I mean, as much as there are many reasons why I don't support Chris Paul, but there are many reasons why I would have loved him to be a Laker. And I know his trade was vetoed by the NBA for the Lakers, but man, Kobe and Chris Paul would have also been amazing to watch. But I, I love watching Chris Paul and Booker as well, because when you get someone who can feed the ball to a pure shooter, and I don't mean like a catch and shoot player, I mean someone who can also create a shot, score from the mid range, the 3-point line, drive to the basket, got the set. I think it's just so good because he'll always pick you at the right time. So your efficiency as a shooter goes up. And I can speak from that point of view simply because I've played the shooting role as well. And I would dream of having a passer like Chris Paul. Obviously, my level is also not to be mentioned. But yeah, I understand why any shooter would lick their lips to play with Chris Paul.
And it's a good contrast to discuss Phoenix Suns after the Lakers, because I think Phoenix Suns is a team that's nailed the combination of old and new. They've got the experience in the Jay Crowders and the Chris Paul. And now actually with the COVID protocols, Bismarck Biyombo has come in and he's played some really good minutes for them in the recent few games. So they've got the experience, but then they're young players in Devin Booker, my gosh, Bridges? Right. Sorry, Bridges for them.
Mikal Bridges.
Mikal Bridges. There we go. So Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, DeAndre Ayton, Devin Booker. They've got a good combination of old and new, right? You've got your young players, you've got your experienced players. So, and in the playoffs, we saw Chris Paul was able to come in more. He was able to be that orchestra conductor. Devin Booker had a phenomenal first playoffs, I thought. Really showed a lot of composure for someone who'd not been to the playoffs before. So love this team. Really fun
also,
team to watch.
Krishnan broke the Kendall jinx as well.
Also, credit. That is true.
Shout out to my boy Devin Booker.
The Kardashian / Jenner jinx of absolutely sucking once you start dating. It impacted so many people. Kuzma, James Harden, Tristan Thompson, then
Blake Griffin,
Ben Simmons. It's impacted so many people. He was able to break that Kardashian Jenner curse. Good for him, Devin Booker. Quick shout out also to Chris Paul's job that he did in OKC that one season. Just played one season, but took them to the playoffs, and which no one expected after both Russell Westbrook and Paul George had left. Took them to the playoffs, had a very close series against Houston, and just lost in Game 7. So they gave a real fight to Houston in the playoffs as well. Chris Paul, wherever he's going, he's making a difference. He's making an impact. And he's like, what, 37 now? How old is Chris Paul? Probably 37 is my guess.
Ancient. That's all that's important. He's ancient. And it's time that he leaves. Just get out of here now. Enough. I'm done watching him. He's 36.
36.
Oh man, he can easily play 4 more years.
Absolutely killing it. So Maz, we covered the big changes in the league since Klay Thompson got injured. Now he's returned. Hopefully he keeps on his way, keeps on growing, keeps on getting better, shooting better, scoring better, gets into his full Klay Thompson flow. But Maz, the All-Star game is coming up. At the time that we're recording this, the results aren't out as yet on who's going to be in the team, but it will be out by the time our viewers and listeners see/listen to this. Maz, let's get into it. This is our last segment of the episode. Just our predictions for the All-Star game. It looks very confusing. It's more open than it's been in the past few years. Let's start off with the Eastern Conference, Maz. Who are the 5 players who are in the All-Star team this year in the starting five? Obviously, it's going to get mixed up with the selections and all that, but just from the Eastern Conference, who are the five? And then we get into the Western Conference.
Okay, so the Eastern Conference, Kevin Durant, of course.
Okay.
Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Okay.
So we're going with 3 front court and 2 guards, right?
Correct.
Okay. So then I've got to go with Joel Embiid. Got to. And this one's a tricky one. The guard situation's a bit tricky, but I think I'll go with DeRozan and not sure, but that's a tricky one. Harden. I think I'm going to go with James Harden.
So one question was that is DeRozan listed, if you're on the All-Star side, is he listed as a guard or a forward?
Yes. He's listed as a guard.
He's listed as a guard. Okay,
Yes.
perfect. So I thought he would be listed as a... So I would actually agree with you then. I agree with... So for my front court, agree with Mazhar DeMar DeRozan. I'm going to switch up from James Harden, I believe you said. I'm going to switch up and say Trae Young. I know the Hawks have been pretty terrible this season, but he's had some pretty decent games along the way. He had a 50-point game somewhat recently. He's still been scoring at a high clip, so I'm going to give that spot to Trae Young. Front court, it's hard to deny the top 3. It has to be KD, Giannis, and Joel Embiid. All 3 have been phenomenal this season. The only reason that's even debatable for KD and Giannis to be in the MVP conversation, and they are in the MVP conversation, is just they've gotten it before. It's just fatigue from having voted for them before. Maz, let's not go into all 7, but can you think of 5 bench players you'd want? I know it's 7 totally, but who are the 5 peer players off the bench?
Yeah, for sure. Trae Young has to be there. I agree with that. I think Zach LaVine, but will he play or not, given that he's just going to come back from injury? I don't know. He might sit it out, but I definitely think Zach LaVine's going to be in there because Chicago's record, no question about it. I would go with Jason Tatum. You can't leave him out. So, and Jimmy Butler for sure as well. I also think Jarrett Allen is making a case for himself, but the question is, I don't know what the structure will be. So it's tough to say how many front court players will they have. Will there be a focus on guards, given it's, it is the All-Star game. You want to see more shooting and scoring, or then the big dunks, but how anyone can dunk, right? We're talking about All-Stars here. So I think I would like to see Jarrett Allen in the All-Star game for sure. I think these names, I'm also going with what I would like to see, but also being a bit more realistic about who will be there. Tatum will be there. There's no way. You have to have a Boston player in there. Also, Jason Tatum is so good.
I actually agree with you. And I think just given Cleveland's performance this season, 5th in the Eastern Conference, if I'm not mistaken, looking really, really solid, which is a complete shock to me. I did not think they'd be anywhere in that area. I agree with you. I think Jared Allen makes it. I'll also agree with you on Jason Tatum. What was your last one? And Jimmy Butler. So I would agree with you for the 3. I'm actually going to switch it up a little bit on the guards because I said Trae Young in my starting. I actually think LaMelo Ball makes it this year. I think he's been really solid. He's been a really fun player to watch. I mean, they're also 7, so we could both be right in this situation since we're only naming 5. I think LaMelo Ball makes it as well. The second spot, I think, has to go to Zach LaVine. They've been so fantastic, the Bulls. They deserve at least 2 in the All-Star game. So that's my prediction. Muzz, Western Conference may or may not be more straightforward. I think it is more straightforward, at least for the starting 5. What do you? Maybe I'll go first for this one since you went first last time. I'll go first for this one. I think guards, Ja Morant, Steph Curry. Ja Morant's been fantastic, even though he had the big injury stint. He's come back. Memphis look amazing. Steph Curry, not much to say about that one. We know the guy. He's pretty decent.
Who? Steph?
Yeah, Steph. You may know Wardell. You may know Wardell. He goes by.
Oh, his son, right? He's
pretty good.
He's pretty good.
And so Steph and Ja Morant. And then I think the front court, I expect it to be LeBron James. He'll for sure be there. Nikola Jokic. The third spot is a little bit more challenging. I'll give it to Paul George, but I don't think that's going to be the answer. Plus, he's going to be injured. So I'll say Paul George, but they'll obviously need a replacement. Yeah, I'm missing someone, Maz. What do you got?
So let's start with the guards since you went with the guards first as well. Bodil Curry's son for sure. I think he can shoot the ball pretty well. He's only a 52%. He's only a 52% this season. At least for a while he was from the 3-point line. Only 52%. Ridiculous shooter, man. That guy is unbelievable. Steph Curry, what a monster. Would have loved to have seen Klay there, but of course it's got to be Ja Morant. And can you believe who we are leaving out? Can you believe it? It's shocking that we have to leave him out, but we'll get to that in a bit. LeBron James is obviously signed, sealed, delivered. He's going to be one of the captains, so that's also a given. Nikola Jokic pretty much picks himself. I'm not sure about the third person. It is a bit tricky. I would probably say Paul George would make it. I would want Karl Anthony Towns in there or a Rudy Gobert in there. One of them for me makes that a lethal 5, Cat or Gobert, but I don't think they will make it. Wiggins also has a good shout, but let's be realistic. Even though he's been popular amongst the votes of the people, how much will media and whoever else votes the other section vote for him? That is the biggest question mark. So I will go with Cat being the third player picked to start in the front court for the West.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think Cat's probably a good shout out. I'll actually switch mine. I think rather than Paul George, I think it would probably be Rudy Gobert just because Utah still look pretty decent. Off the bench 5, I'm going to go with, I had some time to think about this. I think Luka Doncic. That's pretty much a shoe-in with the fan voting, especially. Second one, I think Donovan Mitchell. I think, I know we can only have to name 2, but I think Devin Booker will obviously be Devin Booker, Chris Paul. I guess it can only be one of them. You know what? Let me think this through again. Sorry. This is really hard. Totally picked.
I'll help you out, Krishnan.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with more guards making the West team for sure.
I think it has to be, right?
I don't think the bench matters, right? In terms of front court and back court. So I'm gonna go with Booker. I'm gonna go with Chris Paul. I'm gonna go with Donovan Mitchell. And then I'm gonna go with so either Gobert or Towns, depending on who doesn't make the team, and Paul George. That's gonna be my 5. And then I think they'll slot in Ayton probably and Lillard to take in the other slots.
Yeah, I don't have too much. Yeah, I think that's exactly. I'm actually gonna go with a hot take. Even amongst the 7, I don't think Damian Lillard makes it this season. He's also out right now. So I think because of injuries, I think Dame Lillard and Paul George just don't get voted in. And then you're right, some combination of Rudy Gobert, Karl Anthony Towns, and DeAndre Ayton and Luka Doncic probably fill out the rest. DeAndre Ayton being the most maybe.
I think Wiggins might still make it over Ayton. Let's see. I wouldn't be surprised because let's face it, the Warriors have also got the better record. So, no, sorry, not by the Suns, but then 3 Suns players.
That makes sense. 3 players of any one team is always a little bit of it's rare. Doesn't happen. The Warriors had it, but I feel like it's not super common. But let us know, obviously, at the time that you'll be watching this or seeing this, the All-Star, the lineups will already be named, but you won't know who's picked in what team because they're doing that playground style picking and choosing. But let us know who you think were the biggest misses, who was snubbed from the All-Star game, who deserved to be in, who shouldn't be in. Who are the teams you're most looking forward to for the playoffs this year? There are lots of teams doing well in the league, but we've seen, the regular season doesn't necessarily define the playoffs. With that, we're signing off for this week. We'll catch you again next week. Leave your comments, like and share if you like this episode, and we'll see you again next week. Take care. Bye. If you like this episode, make sure to leave a like and share it with anyone else who might be interested. You can also subscribe on any social media platform that you prefer, and all our links are in the bio. We also have a website with all our episodes as well as blogs and a whole lot of other sports content, so make sure to check that out as well.